All right, on to our graphing. Here's example 2. Again, the first two things you're going to do is identify the amplitude and the period. So looking right here, my amplitude is just the A value, which is 4. Okay, that means it's going to go up to 4 and down to -4. Those are our highest and our lowest values above 0. Okay, the period, our B is invisible right here. That means it is just a 1. It's just a 1 times theta. So our period is 2 pi divided by 1, which anything divided by 1 is just itself. So our period here is 2 pi. All right, so when we graph these, a couple things you got to look out for very first. The first thing you want to look at is this a sine curve or a cosine curve? Okay, if you see sine, you got it really easy because 0, 0 is going to be the first point that you put down. Okay, and then if you go over a period, which is 2 pi, you're back at 0, 0. Starts all over again. Also, this other direction, -2 pi, is also at 0, 0. So you got some points all put down right there. Now, if you'll remember, the sine curve is also 0 right in the middle of the period. If you need to flip back a page and look at that. But your sine curve is also 0 here at pi in this case. And then halfway in between that was when it went up. So it went up to our amplitude, which in this case is 4. And that way and then so it goes all the way up back to 0, and then it's going to go all the way down. Again, if the amplitude's 4, it's going to go 4 positive and 4 negative, then back to 0. Okay, so before I actually graph, well, let's graph this side. I was going to say we can also graph, whoops, I'm not a very good, didn't quite make it down to 4, but close enough, right? So we can also graph it on this. I just kind of keep the pattern. Notice that it had just gone up and now it's coming down. So we're going to go down, whoops, to 4, -4, back to 0, up to 4. So here is our graph when we finish it. And it will just keep going like that. All right, and that's all you're doing. You're just going to draw 2. I really just care about 2 periods right here. So you'll notice that these numbers all matched up for this one. I'm going to kind of show you how to draw it if they don't match up. So let's look at this next one in this same video. This time my amplitude is 1. Can you see that invisible 1 that's in front of my cosine? So there's my amplitude. The period is 2 pi divided by b, which is 1/2. But again, when you divide by a fraction, you're going to just multiply by the reciprocal, or 2/1, and that'll go to 4 pi. Now, notice that there's no 4 pi on here. On the quiz, I actually just put boxes here, and it lets you fill in your own values. So what I'm going to do is going to say we're going to take all of these values off and just make, like there were just 4 boxes that you just filled in. So I always just make whatever that period is, you're going to come out here and make that box, that 4th box, to be the period. So 4 pi in this time. I go halfway in the middle, and it's just half of 0 and 4 pi. So 2 pi, half of that is 1 pi. And then you just notice you're counting in 1 pi. So 1 pi, 2 pi, that means that this is 3 pi, 4 pi. Okay, then you just kind of mirror it over here, just make them negative. So I've got my -pi, -2 pi, -3 pi, and -4 pi. Okay, those we're just going to cross all out. All right, now the next thing you want to look at is what the function is. Notice this is not a sine function. This is a cosine function. That means that it starts at the a value. So our a value here was 1. So at 0, we're going to start at 1. And at our period, we're going to be back at 1. So clear out here at 4 pi, we're going to be back at 1. Also, if we go a period backwards, we're at 1. So that's going to be, those numbers are there. Now with this sine curve, remember we were right in the middle and we were at 0 as well. This time you don't want to be up here. Again, you actually want to be at the bottom. You want to be at your -1 halfway between it. Okay, same thing over here at that -2 pi, you're going to be at -1 right there. And then on the quarters are when you're going to be at 0. Okay, so you'll be at 0 in between our highest and our lowest, and in between our lowest and our highest. So just fill in those zeros, and then we connect the dots. And there's our cosine curve. Isn't that nice? All right, let's try 2 more here. Then we'll go into we'll save the last 3 for our last video. But let's look at this one. What's my amplitude here? Amplitude is just 1/2. So it's, again, just your A value. And then the period right here is a fun one. So notice my B is 3. So the period is 2 pi over 3. Okay, and that's actually, okay, we're just going to make this period, instead of 2 pi, we're going to make it 2 pi over 3. Now, we have to fill out what these other values are, but I use my unit circle for that. So let's see. I don't know if I still have it copied. Actually, let's just come up here. We'll scroll up just a little bit and then come back down. So notice where 2 pi over 3 is. Can you see it on the unit circle? Here's my 2 pi over 3. It's 120 degrees. So a lot of people think that it's easier to half 120 than to half 2 pi over 3. Well, what is half of 120? 60, which is just pi over 3. Okay, so we're going to come back here and write pi over 3. Of course, half of 2 pi over 3 is 1 pi over 3. Okay, and then we kind of half it again. I'd say, okay, if we halved that 60 again, we're at 30, which is pi over 6. So this is pi over 6. And then we're just going to try and do this without the unit circle. So these are kind of like 30 degrees. Here's 30 degrees plus 30, that was 60, plus 30 is 90. 90 we can write as pi halves. And then there's our 120, or 2 pi thirds. Okay, so we're going to come here and we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to write negative pi 6. That's our first one. Then negative pi thirds. Then negative pi halves. Then negative 2 pi thirds. Right there. Okay. All right, we're ready to graph. Let's graph orange. Okay, so this time again, we look at which function it is. It's our cosine function. So it's going to start at 1/2. It's just going to start right there at 1/2. That means after 1 period, or after 2 pi thirds, I'm back at 1/2. Also at negative 2 pi thirds, I'm at 1/2. Halfway in the middle, remember, you're at the opposite. So if we start at the top, we go to the bottom. By the way, if this were a negative 1/2, you would start at negative 1/2. Basically, it just takes the whole picture and reflects it over. So that point that was above is below. That would make this one go up. So just watch that sign. I'm going to erase that so I don't mix you up. But it's not negative 1/2. But if it were, start at negative. Okay, so again, halfway in between, you're at the negative 1/2, and then all these quarters are zeros. Good, and then we can draw this really flat curve right there. And that is our 1/2 cosine of 3 theta curve. All right, last one, and I am going to change this one. I changed it in class, so I'm going to change it for you guys as well. We're going to make this a -5, just to kind of show you how what happens if there's a negative. I forgot to put one in the examples. All right, so the amplitude here is still just your absolute value of 5, -5. So the amplitude is still 5, and your period here is 2 pi over b, which is 1/3. What's 2 pi divided by 1/3? Well, remember, we multiply it by the reciprocal, so that's going to give us 6 pi. So I'm going to go through and change all these. Let's write a 6 pi right here. Half of 6 pi is 3 pi. Half of 3 pi is 3 pi divided by 2. So what I would do is I would just kind of count by half. So there's 3 halves, then 6 halves, then 3 more halves is going to be 9 halves. So 9 pi over 2. And then just make these all negatives. So -3 pi halves, -3 pi, -9 pi halves, and -6 pi. Right there. Okay, now it's a sine curve, so we know that it starts here at, let's see, we're going to trade colors one more time. Sine curve always starts at 0, 0. Okay, now with this negative, because, let's do the period first. So out here at 6 pi, I'm back at 0. Out here, I'm back at 0. And then halfway in between, I'm also at zeros right there. Okay, so normally when we do a sine curve, we go up to our highest. We'd go up to 5 right here. But because this is negative, all of these points that are up in the positive, that are above the 0 right here, to get reflected down. So if this is a negative, you're going to go down first. That's the only difference. And then up to the middle, and then up to the top, and then back. Okay, so I just came from down, so now I'm going to go up to the top, middle, down, middle. And then we can try really hard to connect these nice, lovely dots. And that is my nice, lovely -5 times the sine of 1/3 theta curve. All right, hope you're enjoying this graphing. We will look at the last examples next.